My name is Marie Contreras, and I am the proud owner of Marie C. Pet Care. Nothing is more important than my family, and my pets are part of the family in my house. For the last 5 years, I have dedicated myself to the world of pet care because I am a pet lover at heart. I consider myself an environmentalist, an animal rights activist, and a staunch supporter of the scientific research behind proper animal care and welfare. My videos focus on pet care and tips for having healthy and happy pets. I hope you stick around and enjoy what I have created for you today.
Hello, how are you doing today? Have you ever had a dog, or do you currently have a dog that has bitten somebody, or you're afraid might bite somebody? This is something that I come across on a regular basis. There are a couple of my clients that have a bite history, and because of this, I have to be extra careful with them so that they don't hurt anybody. The first thing that you want to do if you have a dog that has a bite history is you want to try and train it out of them. You know, you can try a behavioral modifications specialist. You can try obedience training. Obedience training often doesn't work with aggressive dogs because they can't sit through the class and be around other dogs or around other people to get the benefit of the class. And obedience classes are primarily geared towards teaching dogs how to sit and stay and walk nicely on a leash. They don't necessarily focus on aggression and becoming more comfortable around other dogs and people. So if you have a dog that's biting, even though a lot of people will say, oh, you just need to train it, training often doesn't work in those situations. Now, I'm not talking about classes that are specifically geared towards aggressive dogs. I think those can be very helpful, and often one-on-one training is something that's going to be beneficial. But the generic group obedience classes that are so popular are really for dogs that get along well with other dogs and just need to have better manners. The first thing that I would recommend that actually works is always keep your dog on a leash. Never walk it near other dogs or people, and get a muzzle. I think muzzles are very useful for dogs like this. Now, you know, it's hot here and it's summertime. I have a dog that I will only walk with muzzle because the dog has bitten and hurt somebody before. The dog is a great dog in the house. It's a good dog with their own family. It's got a history of abuse and it's a rescue. The dog has some behavioral issues, and as long as we walk her on a muzzle, with a muzzle on, she's fine because she can't hurt anybody. And the bottom line is you want to make sure that if you have a dog that may bite somebody or has bitten somebody, that you take every precaution possible to prevent it from happening again. Getting bitten by a dog can cause serious injury. It can cause permanent damage to joints, tendons, ligaments, and you know, that's just not something you want to be responsible for. Aside from the cost, I mean, nobody wants their dog to hurt somebody else or to kill another animal. So even though muzzles get a bad rap, I would strongly recommend becoming familiar and muzzle training your dog if you have any signs of aggression. It doesn't hurt the dog. It's not cruel. Now, I'm not saying put your dog on a muzzle and keep it on there all day. That's not what I'm saying at all. But when you leave the house and you're going out in public, I do think muzzles are very beneficial. I'm going to show a couple screenshots of my favorite brands and some that I'm currently familiar with that I know work to help you if you have this issue. But to put your head in the sand and to just think that, oh, I'll just take him to obedience training, it's unrealistic. What brought this subject up was I was recently bitten. I have a neighbor who just recently rescued a new dog. It's a beagle. The breed doesn't really matter. Any breed can bite. It's not just pit bulls and German shepherds and big dogs. It can be any dog. Some of the smaller dogs are more notorious for biting. But she recently got the dog. I had met him once before without incident. The dog seemed friendly. He was timid, but he was friendly. And this was my second time meeting him in the same week. And the dog had just seen another dog, the new dog, the beagle, and it was riled up. And so I wasn't trying to interact with the dog because I could see that it was already agitated. So the dog hasn't been trained yet, hasn't gone to any obedience classes. And the reason it was available for rescue was because it bit one of the children in its former households. And it had shown aggression towards other dogs. The person who rescued it was to dogs. She had had dogs before, but it had been many years. It had probably been 10 years since she had a dog. And so she was ready for a dog. Sorry about all the cars. But she hadn't trained one in quite a while. So when the dog started jumping up on me, I wasn't looking at it. I was getting ready. I had my hands up like this, and I was getting ready to stand and turn. And when the dog started jumping up, she yelled at it and she said no. And right as she said no, the dog snapped and latched onto my hand. And initially I didn't think it broke the skin because I couldn't see it, but it left a pretty red mark on my hand. And so I went in to get some ice and just to ice it because I was afraid it was going to swell, and I'm right-handed, so I didn't want my hand to get injured. But there wasn't a gaping wound or anything like that. So as I was icing it, I noticed that the cloth that I had wrapped around the ice was getting bloody. So I had had the skin broken. The funny thing is my skin healed very quickly. You know, I cleaned up the wound. It was barely a scrape. I was watching it for infection. I didn't get any infection. I iced it the first day. I washed it real well, and I put some antiseptic on it, and I kept it bandaged for a day or two. But you know, the bruising and the tenderness is just now starting to go away. The skin's been healed for a week, but that dog really clamped down on me, and it could have been much worse. You know, if it had been a child or it got me in the face or something like that. So her response was, you know, I'm going to get him in obedience classes. I'm so sorry. And I wasn't mad at her. You know, it's not her fault the dog bit me. But you just have to have control of your dog at all times. And when she mentioned obedience classes, I told her, I said, you know, he's going to have a hard time in obedience classes because where I live, the rooms are small that they host the obedience classes in, and they pack the dogs in pretty close. And I knew this because I had been to one with my own dog. The outside ones are a little better because you can spread out a little bit better, and space allows a dog to be more comfortable. But I told her, I said, you know, he needs to have a muzzle on him, because if I had been a child or if he had really hurt me, you know, that's a huge liability for her. And as I was telling her this, I could just see her stop listening to me. You know, she checked out. As soon as I mentioned that the dog should be muzzled, she just didn't want to listen anymore. And that's her right. I mean, unsolicited advice is often unwelcome advice. But that's why I made this video. It was on my mind, and if it helps anybody out there, it may not help her because she didn't want to hear it, but if it helps someone else who is afraid to put a muzzle on their dog or thinks it's not necessary. Let me just tell you a story about the dog that I walk that is muzzled. I've been walking this dog for almost 5 years now. And when they first rescued her, she was the sweetest thing. No issues at all. But pretty quickly, while the owner was walking her, the dog had pooed, and the owner was bent over picking up the excrement, and somebody was running, and they ran too close, and they ran right next to them. Well, the dog lunged at them and bit their leg, and that was the first injury that she caused. She offered to pay the medical bills, which she did. It cost her several $1,000s. The guy needed stitches, and she took the dog to a behavioral modification specialist after that. And the behavioral modification person worked with the dog. They recommended a choke collar, a prong collar, and a muzzle, which they put on the dog immediately. And they muzzle trained her, and the dog was fine. So the dog was good for about another year, and then she had a new dog walker who felt sorry for the dog. It was summertime, they were walking her, and they felt like there was nobody around, and so what would the harm be to take off her muzzle, which they did. And when that happened, this guy who was playing ball with a puppy threw the ball in in our direction, and the puppy was curious and wanted to meet the dog. And so as the puppy ran up to this dog, who doesn't have his muzzle on, the puppy got bit in the head. So they were horrified. You know, they took the dog to the vet. The dog needed stitches. The dog wasn't seriously hurt, thankfully, but that was another vet bill that the owner paid for because her dog had caused the injury. So she told all her dog walkers, again, you know, the muzzle must stay on the dog. You cannot take the muzzle off. And they were good for a little while. Well, on a late night walk with yet a different dog walker, they thought, there's nobody around. I haven't seen a soul in sight. It's late at night. What's the harm in taking the muzzle off? Again, they felt sorry for the dog. Different person took the muzzle off. Well, this was a female walker, and shortly after she took the muzzle off, there was this guy walking around the corner who thought she was attractive and wanted to strike up a conversation with her. So he walked up to her to talk to her, and he got bit. Got bit in the arm this time. Well, he didn't want his medical bills to be paid. He wanted the dog removed from the area. He felt like the children weren't safe and it was a horrible thing, and so he called animal control, and animal control got involved and the courts got involved. So once the courts got involved, the owner was pretty scared that she might have her dog taken away from her and have it euthanized. So she made sure that the muzzle was on the dog at all times, and the man that was injured had actually seen the dog being walked by the walkers with the muzzle on. And when he saw the muzzle on it, he spoke to her and he says, you know, as long as you keep the muzzle on, I'll drop the charges, which he did. So it never actually went to the courts. But having that muzzle on kept it out of the courts. And the judge actually had called and spoke to him and spoke to the owner of the dog, and they both said that, yeah, the muzzle was on, it was going to stay on, and so the courts allowed the case to be dropped. Had the muzzle not been on and been seen on, she may have lost her dog. And so that's the real reason that I think the muzzles are so important. I know of a dog that it probably saved her life. And the gardeners are back, so that's it for today. I hope you have a great day and you stay safe out there.
If you enjoyed this video, nudge the like button. If you would like to see more like this, consider subscribing. If you would like to read the blog or check out my new book, I'm going to leave links to them in the description. Thank you for watching.